Okay.
That was the cool part about Randy.
Yeah.
And I could, unload, run it right in the wall, and they'd pat me on the back and say, "That's okay, Tim, and we'll get him next week." This is a championship team I'm racing for now, and at that very moment, Randy and Bertie and Bill are fighting like, cats and dogs. I'm literally, the deal. The story. You covered it. You know.
To have the kind of success that they had, I mean,
it grind my ass every time. I mean, it was hurtful, painful. Still is painful. I mean, like that. To me, that's one of my biggest regrets in racing. Not being able to get in that car.
The day NASCAR and all of us associated in any way with NASCAR forget its past, that's the day we don't have any future.
So, Tim, I know that your dad, Butch, was a racer. What was it like growing up around the sport the way that you did?
I mean, that's really all I ever knew. My dad, yes, Butch, he drove, and his brother Gary, my uncle, and my grandfather. I would just remember going to my grandfather's. He had old cars stacked up in his backyard. It kind of looked like the neighborhood in Christmas Story, but in the back was all these stacked up old modifieds and stuff. And I remember me and my cousin Tommy, who was a year younger than me. I mean, we grew up racing together. We'd get in, act like we were racing each other and playing. And so, growing up watching my grandfather, I don't remember. I remember going to the track to watch my grandfather a few times, but he retired, probably about the time I was 7 or 8, maybe. And then it was just my dad and uncle. And
now, did I see somewhere where your grandmother?
She did race. Yep, she raced. Probably in the 50s. She started out in powder puffs, and then they liked it so much she started driving. A little bit more, and then she was my grandfather's mechanic. I mean, that was all.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I mean they were something. They used to jump out of hot air balloons. At fairs for like $5 to jump. He had
your grandmother and grandfather.
Yep. And
wow.
They'd buy old military surplus parachutes, and then I don't even know where they learned how to do it. I remember.
I don't guess there's any class.
No, I mean military, but I don't think he learned it in the military, nor my grandmother. So, but back in the hard times, I guess $5 was $5, and my grandfather, he also raced motorcycles. I got cool pictures of him at some fairgrounds up in Michigan, and on an old Harley, and it's cool to come from a racing family. I've been blessed that way, and it definitely helped progress my career more than I can imagine.
Now, how did you get hooked up with Ray and Diane DeWitt?
Diane was married to a guy named Bob Seelman, whom my father raced sprint cars against. A legendary racer in Michigan. Bob was so, and then they had split up for quite a while, and then Ray and Diane got together, got married, and Ray had a ArtGo team, late model team that run Berlin and some of the ArtGo races and All American Challenge races. And a guy named Jack Gritter, who was an ARC official, you probably know, he was driving at the time, and a good friend of the family's as well. And they decided to part ways, and I got a call on a Monday night to go to Grundy, Illinois on a Tuesday for an ArtGo race. And I'd known Ray a little bit before that. Him and my dad had some business ventures together. So, but I guess, we started racing ArtGo late models, ASA, and then we moved down south, I think in end of 92, and started running the Busch Series.
How did that move come about, going from ASA to the Busch Series?
Well, I'd really just got going. I mean, I never did win a race in ASA, but I'd run there, I think, a year, and was looking forward to a second year. But Ray had him and DK Ulrich had already formed a partnership with the Cup team, and they were already down here, down in the South. They moved into Travis Carter's old building at the time, and Ray wanted to start a Busch team as well. So it was kind of cool to, it was a lot. It was to just pack up and a couple of my friends that helped me there. We all decided to move down together, and so it was that was helpful, to have your friends that helped you back in Michigan and grew up with racing to come down, and Brian Smith, who still works at Gibbs, and Scott Deal, who worked on Tony Stewart's. He was a car chief with Greg and Tony when they won the championship, and we all did it together, so that made it a little bit easier as well.
You got your first top 10 finish in the Busch Series, and then your first 2 wins at Nazareth. What was it about that place that you liked so much?
I don't know. I guess just being a big old flat track, helped. I like the flat tracks racing, back home, like at La Crosse. I say home. I was from Michigan, but the Midwest tracks, La Crosse and Minnesota State Fair, that's kind of where I guess I grew up cutting my teeth at. And all the flat tracks, just the short tracks in general around Michigan. And I didn't really like Nazareth at first. I mean, it's a hard track, and the Onion, Todd, kind of drew me a map one day, and Randy, my teammate, helped me out some after that. And but I think once I figured it out, it was like I followed David Green in one of the early on races for a long time, and he was so good at all the short tracks. And I was lifting about 50 car lengths past him going into turn 3 down the backstretch, and man, once I started lifting early, and it really came to me, it just like a light bulb went off, and from that point on, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget that when I lifted early, and where I picked up the gas at, and how fast that lap was, and I was like, man, I've been doing this all wrong, and the rest of the track just came to me. So it was a challenge, and I knew everybody else hated it, so I always tried to embrace it, and that kind of helped me, because it's so competitive back then, and just like it is now. I mean, you have to take every advantage you can get, every little thing.
Tell me about that first win. It was for Ray and Diane, I guess, in the 55 car?
Yeah, 55.
Yeah. What do you remember about that weekend?
I remember being I knew I was ready. Like, I just remember, like, I felt good about it. Our short track program, we were pretty tough. I mean, we really didn't have a full-time sponsor. I think the car was unsponsored there at Nazareth. And a couple things I remember, a guy named Ron who ran the DuPont deal. Ricky Craven was not able to run that weekend. He was kind of off doing his cup stuff. I can't think of Ron's last name at the moment, but he handled all of DuPont. Ron and
I know the face.
Kim, yeah. They handled the account, and he had called me a couple weeks before Nazareth and said, "Hey man, I know you run good there. We're thinking about putting DuPont on the car." And I'd be I was like this, yes, please. Well, then I got the call they couldn't do it, and then I won, and then I got the call Monday morning from him saying, "Gosh darn it, we should have put I remember that.
I told you.
Yes, yeah, I know. I mean, and I remember that, and I just remember it. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that was All-Star Weekend, right?
Yeah.
Nazareth was
All-Star.
Yes, it was always the Sunday or the Sunday after the All-Star race, I believe. And
it was the
I think
right.
It was the Sunday after the All-Star race. Yep. Yeah. So we would, and it was just kind of that was always like speed week for Charlotte, so it was a big week to win, and a lot of media, and it just helped my career, boost my career along for sure. And I guess say got the monkey off my back, but it was nice to win with that team that we moved down from Michigan with, and really, we had good people, and but it was kind of a eye awakening for some people that who are these guys that come from. It was kind of an underdog story, I guess, and it just, but I knew, I felt going into that race I needed to win it, and it just kind of all came together that weekend. We were fast right off the trailer.
Now, you said you got the monkey off your back. Had you been feeling the pressure to win?
Well, I mean,
was that self-imposed, or was Ray and Diane on you?
No,
or?
Ray and Diane were never on me.
Okay.
That was the cool part about Ray and Diane. unload, run it right in the wall, and they'd pat me on the back and say, "That's okay, Tim, we'll get him next week." That's just kind of people they were.
Yeah.
And I mean, I owe a lot to them for bringing me here and for having that attitude and always believing in me. That's something that, so many young racers don't have any at all. The pressure is on them right from the get-go. Even though their dads might own the team or have money invested in it, or it's still hard. Everybody wants results now, and I think back then, not just for me, but for a lot of the younger drivers, there was a little more patience built into your career, right? And now it's pretty much you get one chance and get a good car or two or three, and if you don't go, then you're probably out. Unless you just have all the money, but so I was fortunate there, and no, I think it was just I was wanting to get some sponsorship, and I felt like we just needed to win. DK had told me he said, you just got to get some poles and some wins. I remember him saying that, and you'll be good to go. So pressure from myself mainly, but just wanting to do it for other people too, to show them we could.
Almost to a person, I talk to guys who race in the Busch Series, and they get that first Busch Series win, and they talk about the calls that they started getting. Did you start getting calls from people? I
did. I think I started. It was such a crazy time. I mean, we're talking mid-'90s. NASCAR's growth was still skyrocketing, and there were so many teams, and I mean, the amount of just the sheer amount of Busch Series teams, truck teams, Cup teams. I mean, there's probably 60 full-time or close to it, 60 Busch teams, So, and then there was that many Cup teams and truck teams as well. So, I don't remember I didn't get the call from Robert Yates, but I mean, it did bring up you started talking to them people. That was exciting. Yeah. Like for me to, go just walk around the garage and, nod my head at somebody to actually that was a conversation starter winning a Busch race for sure, for me. So it opened up a lot of doors, and I was able to do some stuff that after that I probably would have never been able to do if I hadn't won, and rightfully so, right? I mean, that's what it's all about, it's winning.
You moved over to Doug Taylor's team in '96. Did Ray and Diane just decide that they'd had enough, or what was going on there?
Nah, that was more my move. Just you're always trying to better yourself, and it's probably I really wish I wouldn't have. In all honesty, I mean I have no hard feelings with Doug, but we just didn't click. We clicked as friends, but we didn't click as business partners at all, and I just never felt like I was getting what I needed there, and he probably felt the same way. So, it just wasn't a very good association. But that's racing. You gotta it thickens you and thickens your skin and makes you a little tougher. And but Ray and Diane kept racing for a few more years after that, and Doug did as well. And I that's what I guess brought me to to some other things in my career that I'm glad I got to do.
All right. So, 97, you and Kleenex moved over to BACE Motorsports. How did all that come together? Were you a package deal with Kleenex, or did that just kind of happen by chance?
When I left, Ray and Diane's Kleenex, I had been talking with them, and we just, at the time, it didn't seem that it was going to work out with Ray and Diane for all that to happen. So that was one of the reasons went to Doug, and then when all that didn't work out, we decided Kleenex was still more so on my side of the court than they were anybody else's, and they had expressed Bill Baumgardner, who owned BACE, had expressed wanting to start a second team and being Randy's teammate, and that was. I liked their operation. Obviously, who wouldn't, right? I think they had won a couple, three championships at that time. With one, I guess, one with Johnny, and two with Randy. Yeah. So, or we're about to win the third with Randy when I joined. Yeah. So, that was a very appealing place. I mean, and we formed a team and pretty much around me. I mean, I don't know if I had a lot of input in the team, but we definitely we had conversations, and it was it was a bunch of gung ho young guys from the get go. I'll never forget we moved into a new shop in Mooresville, and it was exciting times, right? Like everybody, it was fun. It was we ran good, and I think we were able to win a race or two that year, and I just being teammates with Randy in itself is you talk about fun. I mean, that was probably some of my best days in racing. And
well, that was exactly my next question.
Yeah.
What was it like having Randy LaJoie as a teammate?
Well, I mean, at the time too, like I'm just trying to not make any waves, right, and learn all I can and be just kind of. This is a championship team I'm racing for now, and at that very moment, Randy and Bertie and Bill are fighting like cats and dogs. I'm literally, the deal. The story. You covered it. You know, like it was not, but they were still winning races, and still able to win a championship. It was the most dysfunctional team as far as dynamics of a crew chief, a owner, and a driver, as far as Randy, Bertie, and Bill as you would ever see. But when they got to the racetrack, they made it work. All week long, you're thinking, what? I mean, this is not good. Like Randy's getting fired, or Bertie's getting fired, or they're all, Bill's gonna whatever. But when they got to the racetrack, they won races, and so I learned a little bit there too. Like like in sports or in racing, things don't always have to be, perfect and shiny, and you just have to have desire and people around you that want to win, and then be able to put everything aside when it comes time to do it. And they were able to do that, so that made me mentally tougher in some strange way, All
right, so I want to get back to the Bill, Bertie, Randy story in a minute, but I mean, Randy LaJoie. What's your best Randy LaJoie story that you can tell in public?
I could tell I don't know. I mean, just there's so many of them. I think just just his fearlessness, just going. I think one of the funniest ones. We had a golf tournament at Indianapolis at the Brickyard golf course, and it was for Chevrolet, if I remember right. We got done playing golf. Well, Randy had won the championship the year before, so he was going to practice the IROC car at the Brickyard that afternoon. And he said, they'll probably let you practice. You need to come with me. I'm like, they ain't going to let Randy. I mean, they're not going to. This is, it's an elite deal. He said, they won't mind. And so we get over there, and we go into one of the trailers, IROC trailers, and there's a Jim Sauter suit hanging there and another one hanging beside it. Randy goes, just put one of them suits on. No one will. They ain't gonna. Well,
never take a dare from Randy LaJoie.
I put the fire suit on, and I walk out the trailer, and Jim Sauter's standing right there, and I'm like, "Hey, Jim, good." I knew.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, he looks at me, and I'll never. I mean, it was the most awkward moment of my racing career, I think. And anyhow, I got to run a few laps at the Brickyard in an IROC car, which was cool, but I still think Jim Sauter he didn't like me because I never asked him, I just listened to Randy, right?
So when Bill and Randy and Bertie were having all their issues, where were you in all that? Did you feel like you had to keep your head down and just mind your own business? Or were you team Randy? Were you team Bill? Were you team Bertie?
Well,
or did you just...
I played the middle of the road most part. I mean, you got to, Bill signed my paycheck. So, I had to, I seen all sides of it. And I think they knew that. I didn't really change. I mean, I still hung out with Randy and had great times with him and learned a lot. I tried to siphon, just get all I could out of Randy because of his experience. And I guess I was enthralled with his happy-go-lucky attitude and the way he drove. And but then again, you had Bertie, who was an awesome crew chief, and the way he handled the people his team was all in. I think, if you ask any one of them, they were all a band of misfits, right? But together they were awesome, right? So we tried to, you wanted to be a part of that, and Bertie had a lot to do with people on my team that he had hired. But it was kind of tough at times, especially when Bill was renting Randy's shop, and Randy wanted him out of his shop. And when I say dysfunctional, it was dysfunctional. But,
I believe you.
So
yeah.
I was kind of stuck in the middle, but I managed to keep it all together for the most part. And maybe in the end, you wish you would have done a few things differently. But I've always been grateful to Bill. He gave me a good opportunity and good cars. And same with Birdie. I mean, they believed in me. That's all I can ask.
So despite all that, Randy won the championship that first year, 97, when you were there, and you wound up ninth in points. Were you satisfied, or had you expected more?
I think I probably expected more. I mean, looking back, I mean, we struggled. Seems like on the mile and a half, like my team seemed to struggle, and I struggled as a little bit as well. The short tracks, we were always pretty damn competitive, but the bigger tracks, speedways, just weren't our forte. And a lot of it was me. I'll say, I think, I don't know. I just never had it never felt like I had the cars, especially at speedway racing. The mile and a half, we were so. Me and Randy would pull one out of his hat, here and there, but that seemed to be at least my weak spot. And but you look back on it, and these guys that you're racing with have a lot of talent, and I could make a good car go most of the time, and but a lot of these guys were making bad cars go as well. So it's like it is what it is, right? You look back and your stats are your stats, and I had some good opportunities, and did the best I could with them. So it just you always want more. I mean, when your teammate wins the championship and you finish ninth, I mean, I would say I was a little disappointed. Yes,
I think it would be human nature to, especially for a racer, to say, all right, Randy may be winning, but I'm easier to get along with. How about you give me his stuff and see what happens and maybe even things out? Did that kind of mindset ever enter into your thinking?
I don't think so, really. I mean,
okay,
I don't think so, because really, like, I was there every day, and I mean, I had Billy Nazareth there, Steve Bird. I mean, it was kind of, I had Vic Kangas at the time. Butch Enders was a crew chief. We tried a couple different things, but like, we were such a tight knit group. Like, everybody worked on everybody's car. Yeah, the 74 had this or that maybe, but I never felt like, to be honest with you, I never really felt like, if they, they said to me, if I needed a new car, thought a new car would do me, they built me one. So
okay,
it never really like, I got to get in Randy stuff. I didn't see it that way.
Okay,
and maybe I should have, but I felt like we were. I felt like it was pretty equally proportioned. I think they actually wanted me to win at times more, just because, I was the new guy, and they were fighting all the time. And so I think sometimes it was like, here, let's see what, Tim can do.
Let me just say this. It was enough to handle to cover Randy fussing at Bill fussing at Randy, Birdie fussing at everybody. That would have been a story if you'd started griping.
Yeah, I know.
That would have been too much to handle.
I guess that just ain't me. I knew I was outnumbered, and it was no comparison. I would have just been. They would have just kept on arguing amongst themselves and not even heard what I had to say. But it's like I said, it was. You had to live through it and to believe it and to see it, and I really. But I think if you ask us, if we were all in this room, we'd all laugh about it, and I don't think there'd be really too many hard feelings about it, any of it. I mean, it was just the way it was back then.
All right, so 98, you won another couple of races. You finished 7th in the point standings, and I know that at some point you started talking to Greg Pollux about you and Kleenex making a move to a new team that he was putting together. How did all that develop?
I mean, we just started talking, and I think, Kleenex wanted to, at the time, was thinking about doing something different, and obviously they were, they want to know if I want to do something different, and I think was
that your way of saying, hey, what about me?
Yeah, I think it probably was, and
okay.
to have someone else come to you and want you, and they really wanted to build the whole car, the whole team, whatever I wanted to do, Greg was willing to do. Like, I remember that, I wanted Harold Holly as a crew chief. They had hired him. He was, putting a seat in my Daytona car when I got the news that Bill had said that I had signed a contract that was, not going to enable Kleenex to go with me anywhere else for 2 years. So, was that the case? I don't know. Would Bill have fought that? Yes, he would have fought it tooth and nail. We knew that. I mean, that's what Bill did, right? He loved the contractual side of, he did. I mean, he thrived on it. And,
believe it or not, he actually showed me that contract.
Yeah. I mean, so it is what it is, right? So in the meantime, Kleenex didn't want to fight it, which I don't blame them. I mean, that was I didn't have the funding personally and we probably knew we'd lose, right? So, anyhow, luckily for me, Frank Cece called me and said I could drive his car, and with Stanley, and I think it was Phillips 66 at the time, and so I was. But the only bad part is Greg had given me my number 32. It was going to be, Harold Holly, and lucky for Jeff Green, it all worked out for him. He was able to go over and race for Greg, and they acquired sponsorship. And it's a small little world, and things can change in a hurry. It again, you learn, right? You live and learn, and I learned a pretty valuable lesson about contracts.
All right, again, so if it was me, and I saw Jeff Green get in that car with Harold, and Harold I think was the key to everything, and to have the kind of success that they had, I mean,
it grind my ass every time. I mean, it was hurtful. Painful. Yeah. Still is painful. I mean, like that. To me, that's one of my biggest regrets in racing. I mean, not being able to get in that car, and I really felt like I was just peaking at that time, and felt like everything was going. So, but again, I was pretty lucky to have all that stuff in place anyhow, and to get that far with it all, and. But yeah, I mean, what ifs, right? Like that was always the biggest what if for me in my racing career, for sure. What if I could have gotten with Pollux and Harold, and it would have. I think it would have changed the trajectory of my career for sure.
How did you wind up with Frank and Scott?
Well, I think I think Todd was going to do some Cup stuff with was that Tabasco year maybe?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So they had Phillips 66, and man, Frank called me and said, hey, would you be interested? And like that was a great team too. I mean, that was, but when I went there, I think, we just didn't hit a lick for the most part. I mean, it was terrible, the first year. And, I think the year after that, I got Billy as a crew chief, Nazareth, and that was better. But it still never felt. I mean, I shouldn't say it didn't feel like home. Everybody treated me good. Scotty was good to me. Frank was good to me. But I always, for some reason, in the back of your mind, Jeff Green's winning races and winning championships, and it irked me. Did it have an effect on what I was doing at the time? I don't think so, as far as my driving. But it's in the back of your mind.
Did you ever give him a nudge on the racetrack that maybe you wouldn't have given? Yeah.
No, I never really felt like Jeff. And he was just good for him, right? Like it was, was I pissed at Bill? Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, but to this, I mean, that was just Bill, and again, you learn lessons and life lessons, and it toughens you up, and it makes you a smarter person. And, sometimes you got to not be greedy and be happy with what you got, I guess, is a lesson. I think, I feel like looking back, I just needed to do a few things differently, and it probably could have happened where if I'd have just talked to a few more people and been a little more communicative, and maybe we could have worked out, maybe not. But, it's but as far as Jeff, no, good for him, right? He had a good career, and that started it, right? Started a lot of things opening up for him, and Greg Pollock's always been a stand-up guy, right? So good for them.